This is the last part of a little series of films covering the restoration of a railwayman's cottage in the Toten area of Norway. No, not that one. That's just a shed across the river. Turn the camera around. Yeah. I thought I'd make a little update about the architectural elements that we've found opening up this building, and to do with the antiquarian history of the building, which has been stated as the building having been built in about 1900 or slightly before, and then again a building period sometime in the 1930s, and then other than that they don't really know. Now, the reason why this was a slightly strange building to look at in the first place is because it isn't typical for a building from 1905, but it has lots of traits of later building fashions. And now that we've really opened up the building and seen it in all the different areas, we understand completely its history. So the boards that we're seeing here around the windows, and presumably the windows too, possibly, not definitely, the windows could be older, but the boards that we're seeing there, which have what's called a farce here, they're wider boards, but they look like thinner ones, and that's typical for the 1930s. The boards above have nails in them which weren't available in the 1930s, so that has to have been built after the war, and it looks to me like the whole of the second story of the building is built in around about 1950, because we've also seen, as you might have noticed in an earlier film, I might be able to just cut in a bit of footage at this point, or a picture. We know exactly what the boards look like from 1900, its first building stage. And I would say that this building had a lower roof with just a loft, not a room upstairs. With a different angle of the roof. That pitch of the roof is more modern than 1900. It's typical of the 1930s, but people in the countryside may be a little bit behind the fashion, and might still do that in the 1950s. Supporting this argument, you can see those 6x8 inch beams there which have been sawn off. They would have supported the old roof construction, and all of that timber framing that's done above those was done newly in I reckon 1950. So the insulation looks in good condition. There's a little bit of rot around the windows because this wasn't a waterproof system, this way of doing the windows, and the way that we're going to repair them is going to be a waterproof system like this, where this board above the window goes right back to the wall behind the boards, so any water coming from the boards goes over the surface instead of into the construction. Same at the bottom. Waterproof, the waterproof window system. Why they didn't do that in the first place, I can't imagine. Same thing we've done there. Hopping back a little bit in the process, we can see our tent that we built to keep us dry with the torrents of rain that came down at that time of year. And this is our little systematic production of the boards. We were going to have them done at a sawmill, but we found out in the end that it would be just as well we did it like this. So the top board is a kind of T shape. The underboard is slightly thinner than the top board. I think it's 19mm underneath and 22mm on top. And then the width of the top boards varies. We had a few boards perhaps that were 12.5, 13 centimetres, and then some that were 15 centimetres and some that were 18 centimetres. That way you have a few different widths to juggle with when it comes to getting the mathematics of the boards to work out correctly for the corners and the windows and everything. So small changes are not really very noticeable. In fact, they just make the wall slightly more lively. If everything is exactly the same size, it actually makes it a little bit more boring to look at, which is and that kind of thing is very typical on older buildings, so it's authentic to do it in that way. To allow for the maximum amount of diffusion openness of the walls, we decided to use a strong paper as the external windproofing. That's the repaired window back in its rightful place. And then those are the 19mm boards with a small block loosing, support block to stop the top boards from curving. This is how I deal with the damage to the paper, a little bit of foam. We've taken off the boards on this southwest facing wall and revealed some rot in the bottom plate. I'll just translate what I'm saying here. So the rot stops, you see the knife point goes in only a few millimeters, so I can judge how much good timber there is underneath. The rot stops at that point there on the outside edge, and there's the same pattern across. You can establish a pattern of the rot, and there's adequate fresh unrotted timber at the bottom to hold the house together, and the insulation quality of the rotten timber is the same as the sawdust, so there's not a good enough reason to repair that whole piece there. And the new solution for doing the window will be waterproof, so there won't be any further water into this wall, so that rot should just dry out and stop. That's my thought process. I have, however, decided to draw in the wall, to pull the wall in, because it has had some slippage outwards, and the foundation is not a very flexible foundation really. I mean, they subside slightly, these old foundations, and you have to put things straight again and then put in new stones on top of the wall to wedge up the house again. It's more or less the same thing was done when the house was built, and it's an ongoing process with these kind of foundations where maybe a few stones are on the mountain and others are just on the surface of the earth, and they do subside and change with the different frost and everything every year. Different levels of depth of frost will change a foundation on a house like this. So while the wall is off here, it's pertinent to try and pull it in, because I think the difference was here was about 6 centimeters from the corners to the middle, so the middle stuck out 6 centimeters. So it's a slow process this time. It's only a few millimeters at a time that are being pulled in, and I've got quite limited equipment with me. So inside here you can see how I've used the door opening there and put a beam across, and then use compression straps, ratchet straps to pull. So there's something there screwed to the floor, and then a bolt that goes through, and then those combination of those things trying to give enough power to pull the wall in. Those straps, they pull about 200-300 kilos probably. I got this, so I managed to pull it in a couple of centimeters only. It's better than nothing. And it makes putting these outside boards on much easier. That's a bit for earlier in the process when we just opened that up. So there you can see really clearly the old boards from 1900. Some of the materials used. There's a pair of trousers in there, ski trousers. They're from the 1930s, they're kind of knickerbockers. +4s, I think they're called. Ski trousers. And that was the rot underneath the east-facing wall. So if these windows had been stolen, and it's kind of obvious that there would have been quite a lot of damage. The house was empty for a few years, I think perhaps in the 80s or late 70s. So we just replaced the boards that we'd broken opening it up to do the inspection, and then put on the windproofing. It's also slightly waterproof. And it's just a strong paper. It's actually called polar bear paper, Isbjørnpapp, or the dreaded expanding foam. But it's useful in places where you need an airtight seal between an old and a new part. Small amounts of it I'm not worried about. And then we blew in the insulation through these little holes that we've drilled. That's borax treated cellulose fibre insulation with very sticky tape over the holes. This is some footage from a previous job with the same equipment, just in a new build. We're not going to do the change those boards at the very top there because they're not too bad, and it makes the process much more expensive because of all of the electricity and the details that are up there. So this is a part of our compromise to keep this project to budget. So it just remains to show some images, a bit of footage from the last couple of days at work with the copied boards back in place, hand nailed. Little repair on the back wall there where there was a leaking gutter. Note the waterboard at the bottom, van Brett, the strong plank at the bottom of the wall there. That's really what's giving the bottom plate back some of the strength that's been lost under the windows. Do you remember from an earlier film in this series? And then down with the scaffolding after, oh, there's the customer doing a bit of painting. He's using a compositionsmaling. It's made from starch and pigment. It's traditional in Scandinavia. So we didn't do the final paintwork, that's all left to the customer. Just down with the scaffolding, and then just a few more images of the last day. All the different forms of viewer participation help to support the channel, whether it be clicking the like button, becoming a subscriber, or just making a comment. Some people have even supported me financially on the Patreon site. So thanks very much to everybody who has supported the channel and participated, and welcome back to more films about restoring and building Scandinavian wooden houses and all the other things that I get up to. Bye!